On today's podcast, I have Dr. Paige Gutheil, and I am so excited for you guys to get to know Dr. Paige, to hear more about her story, the work she does, and just everything inside of her service when it comes to women's health. So, Dr. Paige, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, of course. It's going to be such a great conversation. I cannot wait for women to kind of hear more of your heart and the important work you're doing for women's health, hormone health, and so much more. So I'd love to just start with you sharing a little bit more kind of about your personal wellness journey. Where did you start and what kind of set you up on the path you're on now as a doctor?
Yeah. So I am an osteopathic family medicine physician by training. And so I went into medical school, learning all the things, a very holistic approach. And as happens with a lot of careers, the career does not set you up to live what you know, right? And so I come back to the fact all the time that being an expert in a space does not automatically guarantee you ease of implementation of the space, in this
Right,
case, health. And
right.
so I had a tough time in medical school and residency just with things like body image and managing healthy body weight, getting to sleep, and just enjoying life, right? And so, as I evolved, I just kept personally coming back to the thought of like, why does health sound so hard,
Right,
right? And
right.
why does it sound so strict? And it just never sat well with me. And so, as I evolved and just kind of tried to get back to a normal life after training, I kept coming back to that point of like, shouldn't health be more fun? Shouldn't we be focusing on things we enjoy more, and then maybe just everything else will fall in place?
Yeah, yeah.
And I say now that I serve women who are some combination of stressed, tired, overwhelmed, overweight, and generally feeling older than they should. And
Right.
that's exactly where I found myself in my like late 20s and 30s, even before I ventured into the pregnancy space, which flips you upside down.
Right.
And so I just found that I kept coming back to the thought of like, I have all this expertise, but yet myself, my colleagues, my patients, my now medical students, we're all in the same boat. And so I feel like implementation wise, I'm right there with my clients
Yeah.
and trying to, impart that knowledge and that expertise and that guidance. But I feel like my strongest message in my personal journey is just being a master of getting back up again, a
Yeah.
master of rerouting, a master of adapting, and just releasing that perfectionist attitude that medical training just breeds into you to some degree.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so incredibly cool to hear because that's what we need, right? We need that reassurance and that reminder of just continuing on, getting back up again, keep going, like be willing to adapt and evolve and understand that it's okay if health feels that way, right? I think
Yeah, well,
sometimes it's so hard to get out of that rigidity or that feeling of like it has to be like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's honestly refreshing to even hear you say that. I soak it in every time I get that feedback
Yeah.
because there is absolutely a narrative out there of like perfection. And I've heard people say it like, I wouldn't go to a broke banker, so I'm not going to go to a doctor that doesn't like look a certain way, or running the triathlons or
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
I totally get that. But I also think part of my, superpower is being right there with my clients and helping them navigate the path, because everybody's unique in their own health abilities, their own health goals, how they want to reach those goals.
Yeah, and that's refreshing, right? To kind of hear a doctor say, I'm in it with you, kind of navigating it with you. And that's kind of part of the relationship that you're building with with your clients, it sounds like, is just kind of that relatability and really getting into that refreshing headspace. So, Dr. Page, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about your business, right? I know you do a lot of virtual consultations, you have a brick and mortar practice. Would love for you to share a little more about your business and kind of what you do specifically when it comes to women's health, functional medicine, and just serving in that space.
Yeah, so about 7 years ago, I formed Signature Primary Care and Wellness. And that was after being in a very traditional private practice for almost 15 years. And like I mentioned before, I trained in a very holistic model, very whole body medicine model. But then also training spits you out into the healthcare system, which is
Right,
very siloed, right?
right.
It's very system by system. It's very rushed. It was 10, 15-minute office visits. And so I just found myself growing more and more misaligned. And the more I delved into functional medicine training and health coaching and lifestyle medicine, and honestly, also diving into my role as a professor to medical students, sometimes you go through those periods in life where the misalignments, you just can't ignore them anymore, right?
Right, right.
So I frequently say I decided to gracefully exit the healthcare system,
Yeah.
exit stage left,
Yeah.
and developed Signature Primary Care and Wellness. So locally, I partner with patients in a membership model. So they pay me a flat monthly fee, and that gives them a variety of services. And then virtually, I partner with patients both on a membership and also in, I guess, for lack of a better term, like package way,
Right.
where people can partner with me for a 3-month period. And then my jam is just really looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
So, what I call whole health, I describe as mind, our emotions, our cognitive, like, are we firing on all cylinders? Our biochemistry, which is all the fancy, nutrition and hormones and electrolytes and everything underneath the hood,
Right.
our body structure through fitness. And then, I think you hear like mind, body, spirit a lot. And to me, I say it that way because I think sometimes it can sound a little cliche. But I frequently find myself saying, mind, body, spirit, yes, but also life.
Yeah.
So part of what I love doing with patients is just delving into their environment, relationships, resources, like how are we navigating life and how is that either being very uplifting to our health, or oftentimes we find ourselves in a situation where life is like oppressive to our health. And it's
Yeah.
only when we dive into that life coaching side of things that we're able to kind of like make some movement on the true health goals. So both virtually and in person, we have, kind of a health coaching model along with the traditional doctor stuff.
Wow. I mean, such a great variety of support. And again, something that I haven't really come across, even in my own research or my own connections with doctors, which is why I've loved connecting with you and hearing more about your philosophies and hearing more about the ways that you're really serving your patients and your clients and want all of us to really think about health from the inside out. Dr. Paige, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about when you are talking to clients virtually in your practice, things like that, what seems to be the biggest hurdle in health that comes across most often in your conversations?
Ooh, that is such a good one. Um, I would have to say kind of the big bucket of energy management.
Yeah,
And I know that sounds very broad, but at the root, it always comes down to that.
right,
And I frequently find myself talking about kind of separating what we perceive as, our physical energy. We know what it feels like to be tired, and there's a lot to tackle there, a lot of reasons behind that.
right,
Our emotional energy, and then our intellectual or cognitive energy. And so I am frequently diving in with patients to say, like, okay, can we parse this out to see like how much energy is going where, right?
right, right,
And then how are we fueling those energy buckets? And how are we restoring those energy buckets? Because at the root of all health, and there's many downstream effects of, those kind of energy management issues. So then I find myself, delving into what brings people to me are kind of the secondary casualties of the energy issues, right?
Yeah.
So it's, hormone issues, it's metabolism issues, it's gosh, inflammation, autoimmune stuff, digestion issues. But when we rewind, oftentimes the first step for things going awry and the first step to recovery is really kind of restoring that energy balance in the body, because at its core, my true belief is that the body is very wise.
Yeah.
It is constantly trying to restore itself. So we have to remove the roadblocks to healing, and we have to give the body the energy in all three categories to be able to heal.
I love that. And I would love for you to speak a little bit about what would be something you would say to a client or a patient when it comes to restoring their energy? Like, what do those practices look like, or what does that direction or guidance look like for someone?
Yeah. So, it's not sexy. It
Yeah.
really is. There is no magic. Like every day I am thinking, I am lovingly overwhelming people with the basics,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so it's really respecting our body's natural rhythms, getting to bed about the same time, waking up about the same time, having those relaxing evening routines, having an energizing morning routine. I think sometimes we even sell ourselves short when we wake up and we're like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't have any energy.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's give our body a chance to get warmed up, right? Let's
Right.
not like put our mindset back right when we open our eyes. And so are we moving our body in the morning? And I'm not even talking about like hardcore workout, right? Although that has its place, but just getting the body moving, getting the body hydrated, getting the body well fed, getting our mindset in the right place. It's amazing how getting back to just the basics, which are very much easier said than done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's what gets us headed in the right direction. And those are all things that we can start doing while we're looking into the other things.
Yeah.
What are our blood counts? What are our electrolytes doing? What are our hormones doing? Yes, we do all the fancy stuff too, but even myself, like I, doctors are human too. Again,
Yeah.
when you're going through a funk, you're like, gosh, am I anemic? Is this perimenopause? I'm sure my thyroid, and I'm like, wait a minute, what have I been eating? Like, have I been hydrating? Like, have I fallen,
Right.
do I have tweaks to make in these small lifestyle categories?
Right.
But then I do have to say, it women can fall into kind of the opposite issue where they feel like, oh, I'm not going to go to the doctor
Yeah.
because I just need to be better in sleep, hydration, fitness, whatever.
Right.
And they think, I just need to be better. And that may be true. We could all do better. But the key is really to get everything on the table to figure out where your best starting point is. I can't tell you how many times that women kind of gaslight themselves in front of me, and they're like, well, this is happening, but this
Right.
probably explains it, and this is
Right.
happening, but this probably explains it. And I'm like, yes, that contributes, but so does your anemia, hypothyroid, low vitamin D also, you
Right.
know? And so
Right.
it's like, oh, if we can work on both sides at once, our self-care plan and our professional care plan, then the progress starts coming.
I love that you touched on that, because that is a very real thing that I see as a wellness coach, and that it's reaffirming to hear from a doctor's perspective, like how we as women have to really step into giving ourselves permission to say, I can get more support, right? I can talk about what's going on with my health and not necessarily come up with some story about why it might be the way it is. As you said, like we all live busy lives, lots going on. Like there's always potentially a reason, but it's so good to get the data and get connected to a professional. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of what that looks like for you. Like if someone was going to work with you, and we're going to talk about the sync component in a minute, but if someone was going to work with you, whether that's in your practice locally or virtually, what does that look like? Like, how would they get connected with you? What does that process look like? What do you unpack with them? Kind of talk through some of that data that you work on collecting, because I think that's so critical for women to hear and understand when they're working with someone like you.
Yeah. So we love working with women that really are ready to, dive in and take that broad approach. And I think that, first of all, deserves to be applauded because
Yeah,
it is not easy.
it's not easy.
And I lovingly hand over an assessment to my clients. That is a big assignment, right?
Yeah,
It is looking at your health, both, you know, what you've been through over time. It's gathering your health goals, it's gathering your health philosophy, it's gathering your preferences, it's gathering information about family history and previous testing and nutrition and fitness and sleep and stress, and really helping me put everything on paper and see that big picture. Someone once told me that after they filled it out, they felt like they just kind of dumped their purse out on the
yeah,
table in front
yeah,
of me. And I was like, that's exactly what we're doing. We're
yeah,
dumping out your health purse. We're going to throw away the Cheerios and the wrappers, and we're going to get everything organized. And so that is, I feel like my superpower is like big picture. Okay, where do we start?
yeah,
And so I know it can sometimes seem overwhelming from a patient perspective, but I think when we can, the only way we make change is to know all the contributors to health.
yep,
And then we can see, okay, where do I want to prioritize my efforts? And that, quite honestly, is a mutual decision.
right,
And so, I'll make recommendations on health data to get what I call kind of foundational information that might involve things like blood counts and glucose and insulin levels and thyroid and vitamin levels and different things.
yeah,
But once we kind of get a good picture, I want to know not only it's not as important, quite honestly, for me to say like this is what you should do.
right,
I want you to reflect, which is part of the superpower of that assessment, to be honest, is like that reflection exercise for women. When do we take the time to just
yeah,
sit and really put on paper what's going on?
right,
But so I want you to really reflect like not only what I need to do, because we are surrounded by a list of things we need to do,
yeah, yeah, all the time.
but yes, but what am I able to do?
Yeah,
And just as importantly, what do I freaking want to do?
right, right,
Because um, I can say all the time, like, I want to go for this protein goal and I want you to walk and I want you to heavy strength train and all these things. But if you have a resistance to that, you are doing nothing but adding stress to your life
right,
by trying to get better.
right,
And like, what sense does that make? Right.
right,
So I'm a huge fan of the win-win. I think that health does not have to be it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to feel bad. It doesn't have to be a chore. I think we should be able to like find joy through self-care and wellness.
yeah,
That might be aspirational, like you have encountered with your clients. Like, we don't always grow up with the best relationship with exercise or food or
yeah,
self-care. Like, we're not being celebrated for those things.
yeah,
Nobody's taking us aside and saying like, hey, have you taken some deep breaths today? More likely, we can remember what it felt like in fifth grade gym class when you couldn't get to the top of the rope as
right,
a female,
right. Oh my
with
gosh.
a, yeah, with a,
Totally.
with a, like, what was it called? The physician's health test or
Yeah,
presidential fitness test or
yeah, yeah,
something.
something like that. Yeah.
Like, we were designing fitness tests based on male bodies, even in the fifth grade. Like,
Yeah.
no wonder.
Oh my goodness. So incredibly powerful to hear your perspective, Paige. I think the thing that I love the most is how you talk about how much time you take with women and your clients. And
Yeah.
this is not a 5-10 minute touch point that you do every 6 months. This is really like a deep dive opportunity for women to go inside out and have a doctor's guidance with the medical component, but also the lifestyle component, which is so incredibly cool. I would love for you to talk and kind of switch gears here a little bit to sync, right? So Dr. Paige and I have been connected through the sync community. That has been such a gift in my life. And I feel so fortunate to connect with Jenny and Paige and Kelsey and the amazing women that are a part of this program. And in the show notes of this podcast, we'll make sure you have all the information for how to get connected to Dr. Paige and how to get connected to sync. But I would love for you to talk about the sync partnership, Dr. Paige. I'd love for you to share, how you got started with doing this with Jenny, what your passion is for it, and why you're just excited to be a part of it too.
Yeah, it has been such a blessing. And gosh, it was so interesting even how we all met. Jenny and I, well, we're all three part of a business group. And Jenny, I had met by doing her podcast. And, she calls me up one day and tells me about, her course and what kind of support that women were trying to get from physicians, having the conversation about healthcare philosophies like, hey, I don't want to just be normal. I want to be optimal,
Yeah.
and I want a little bit of a deeper dive than the traditional screening methods.
Right.
And just, things feeling clunky with being heard and having that health philosophy respected. And so we talked about, how I could serve her community. And then lo and behold, Kelsey literally lives less than a mile from
It's
me.
so wild. So cool.
Yeah. So, we all have such similar philosophies. Yes, I come from kind of the doctor lens and the whole health lens that is a little broader than the sync community, perhaps.
Right.
The sync community really, I just love looking through that lens because it's so powerful for women to get in touch with their menstrual cycle and learn more about their bodies. It just really is a great entry point.
Right.
And so being able to serve women who have been learning from Jenny and learning about their bodies, and then sit down to like zoom out again and look at all the health components. And it's kind of funny when I talk about it, I'm like, we're zooming out, but we're also diving deep. And what are we
Yeah.
doing here?
It's a mix of things.
Yes, it's a mix. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's been such a gift to have you and Jenny and Kelsey kind of really come together in this partnership and just offer this variety as far as support from, again, the doctor component with you to the training component with Kelsey to the education and knowledge component with Jenny, and then allowing coaches like me to come in and be someone who kind of works with you and figures out ways to get women connected to the amazing resources that we've created in Sync. And so I'm just so grateful for all of you and grateful for the work that you're doing within this specific partnership. Paige, I'd love
yeah,
for you to kind of, I'd love for you to dive a little bit about or into kind of this concept of, when women are feeling like they're not being heard, right? You talked a little bit and you touched on that when it comes to working with a doctor, when it comes to unpacking hormone health, when it comes to just learning, like, what do you need for your longevity wellness? If a woman is working with a doctor who is not really like hearing her or is not really serving her, like, what would be your best advice for that woman that might be listening to this that really feels that?
yeah. I'm almost half giggling because all of my girlfriends, when they hear this, they're going to be like, yep, that's Paige.
Yeah.
Because I am that girlfriend that if you're texting with your husband, your boyfriend back in the day, let's be
Yeah.
honest, right? I'm going to be like, he said what? No, this is how we're going to say this.
Right. Right.
So, I think especially in this, health space, I come from both sides, right? Like I know what it's like to be a narrow scoped, narrow time availability healthcare professional
Right.
that even with well-meaning intentions, they are
Yeah.
answering to the insurance system, they're answering to their employers,
Yeah.
they're driven by guidelines.
So
and
tough.
maybe don't have the skill set of sitting with a patient and saying, no, actually, I'm going to erase all those barriers and I'm going to work directly with you to find out your health philosophy
Right.
and not dictate the way things are going to go,
Right.
but rather it's a two-way conversation, right?
Right.
So I'm just always a fan of, um, coming in educated, of course, having that background information. And that's part of what I help patients with in my membership that is more of a group membership, not necessarily even partnering one-on-one with me,
Right.
but in a group learning and education experience is, hey, I'm not your personal doctor, but let me tell you how to talk with your doctor. And
Right.
we talk literally through scripts that, it says, if we use, hormones, for example, like, hey, I realize that guidelines necessarily don't recommend specific hormone testing, but because my hormones are constantly fluctuating, but I personally feel like it's important for me to see those numbers and I
Yeah.
would like to order this. Are you willing to do that?
Right.
Or in the example of thyroid, hey, I realize that a TSH level gives me a good, picture of general hormone thyroid function. But I also realize that, a T3 and a T4 and antibodies can give me a broader picture. Are you willing um, to order that? And
Yeah.
that puts a lot of onus on the patient to navigate a conversation that honestly you should not have to navigate. I,
Yeah.
pre-apologize that, we you're sometimes in that situation of feeling
Yeah.
like you have to do that. The other thing I think is interesting is well-meaning patients, were, if I think from a patient perspective, it's very tempting to go and ask a physician, hey, what do you think about this medicine? Or what
Yeah.
do you think about this test? And what do you think about, or I'm concerned that I have this condition. And a physician's mind works in a very specific order.
Yeah.
And so when you go to your physician and you say, hey, these are the things I'm experiencing. These are the symptoms that I'm having. These are when they started. This is what makes them better, what makes them worse. This is what I've tried. This
Yeah.
is what I'm thinking. And then you give the physician the opportunity to ask more information. We're trained to gather information, take in data, and then get to the thinking about conditions and thinking about testing and thinking about
Yeah.
treatments. So
Right.
when we start the conversation with like testing and treatments, a lot of physicians don't know how to like work backwards, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
And so automatically it's like they're thrown on defensive. They don't know how to handle the conversation. And again, pre-apologies, because as a patient, you should not have to navigate that.
Yeah.
But that's often when patients share their frustrations with me, it's like, well, I asked for this test and, they said this, and this. And it's like, oh, but if we go back to the beginning and kind of build the case for the testing, that's where their scientific mind is.
Got it. Got it. That's so good to hear. Because I think again, that's a common thing that I have experienced, but also I know that people that I have talked to or clients that I've talked to have experienced is just this kind of gap in how do I ask my doctor about these things that I'm curious about, or how do I navigate this question around testing or a symptom that I'm having or whatever they might be experiencing. And so I love that it's kind of about, getting empowered with the knowledge. Like you said, you teach this knowledge to kind of learn and understand, and then you help your clients craft ways to speak about it. And that's something that I've also learned inside Sync and that I'm grateful to learn from practitioners like you and people like Jenny is inside something like our Sync community, you can learn these kinds of things, which is another powerful reason to get connected to some of the incredible work that you guys are doing with Sync, because again, that educational component can be so huge in these kinds of conversations.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
And to me, it's that balance of like, you want to educate yourself on how your body works, but also, you know, there are so many women that are so tired of
Yeah.
trying to figure out everything themselves and trying to research everything and trying
Yeah.
this and trying this. And, when you can partner with a physician where you can feel safe enough and heard enough to actually put down the investigation mode and just say, this is what's going on. Let's, pour into me.
Yeah.
That is really powerful.
Really powerful and just a blessing for women. I know I have felt
Mhm.
that, right? I know
Mm.
I have felt that. And I feel so grateful to have connected with you and to connect with practitioners that are helping me and other clients and other people do this work because it does get exhausting, right? That's
Yeah,
probably the number one thing that I hear often is I'm just too overwhelmed
yeah,
to even begin to think about how I would even do this. And so that's the message that I want all of you to take away inside this important piece to what Dr. Paige is saying is giving yourself permission to lean into support, right? Giving
yeah.
yourself an outlet and a way to get connected to a practitioner like Dr. Paige, like our sync community, where we help you take out all the thinking and the guesswork, right?
Mhm.
And you can really get connected to somebody that's going to help you decipher between what you're experiencing and what kind of steps you can take in a very specific way so you're not feeling so overwhelmed and exhausted. So I love
Yeah,
that you touched on that because it's so real for women.
yeah. And that implementation piece is so key because, when we go through the process of, pouring out our purse and getting everything on the table, and we have this grand plan that we know we're not, developing a magic plan that's going to work and then we're going to ride off into the sunset, right?
Right.
We're
Right.
we're always adapting and rerouting, but once we have the plan, like life happens. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you need someone who's going to walk alongside you and say like, okay, gosh, that meal prep, plan did not work out this week. Like, how can I
Right.
simplify this? How can I delegate something? How can I trim, to make room for my own priorities?
Yeah, that's so good to just remind all of us, right? Because again, it's life. It's totally life and it's very real in the capacity of like needing someone to walk alongside you in some of the ebb and flow. Paige, before we kind of wrap up,
Yeah.
I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about kind of the lifestyle pieces and the mental and emotional component that you see with women that you work with. This is something that I'm super passionate about and that I also dig into with my clients, but I would love your perspective on this because this is kind of the hidden piece to wellness that we don't always pay the most attention to or look at most often. So I'd love to hear your perspective on, when with the mental and emotional pieces to wellness, like what do you commonly see as hurdles for women? What are they experiencing and how are you helping them work through some of those invisible components?
Oh, yes. So I never want to like prejudge, of course,
Right.
but I will tell you, by far, the majority of women that I speak with are such masters at dealing with stress.
Yeah.
They wouldn't even label it stress. Was
Yeah.
stress an issue for me? I am
Right.
cool as a cucumber.
Right.
And
Totally
because we are so
guilty.
good at it. Yeah.
Right. Totally guilty.
Yeah. So my take on, big take on it is like, yes, we are masters of dealing with stress. So much so that we're under recognizing the like soup of stress that
Yeah.
is our culture,
Yeah.
right?
Totally. Yes.
We are overstimulated and overscheduled oftentimes and have just, environmental influences that put us in this sea of stress. And so if we are not actively navigating that and designing our life in such a way to kind of trim as much as we can out of stress mode and really looking to restore
Yeah.
and down regulate, then we're just going with the flow is stress,
Yeah.
right?
The flow is
So
stress.
a couple of really meaningful questions that I ask my clients that to me are just such a litmus test of stress because again, when we think of stress we think, oh gosh, I love my husband, my kids are doing well, I'm not stressed,
Right.
I'm
Right.
doing all the things. But I would encourage your listeners to ask themselves, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I consider myself on the go?
Yeah.
We could use the B word, but I really don't like this, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we'll just call it on the go.
On the go. I love that.
And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how much or how much do I relate to the statement of like, I'm always thinking about something?
Yeah.
And that's really key because a lot of women, again, I don't want to be stereotypical. A lot of us have like wonderful partners, right? But sometimes our partners are helping execute the plan, the scaffolding that we are running in our mind all the time and
Yeah.
that we have created, right?
Right.
So so it's not taking things off of our plate like we need them to be, right?
Yeah.
And so, and this is a very natural thing, right? Like we're mothers, we are meant to have kind of that mama bear hypervigilance.
Yep.
But when we are having mama bear nature, when we are doers, when we are, serving everyone else, like that just escalates really quickly,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's really the core. And then the other thing that comes to mind in the mental and emotional health conversation is, and it's interesting, I never want to like over medicalize things like feelings and thoughts, but
Yeah.
yet also our brain is an organ just like our heart and our lungs, right?
Right. Right.
And so we sometimes navigate the emotional health space as just like, well, just do better.
Yeah.
I just need to think better and I
Yep.
just need to, get it together.
Yep.
But also we can dive deeper physiologically and say, how am I supporting those synapses and neurohormones?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes I when we think about, okay, I think it's an emotional issue, but also I'm anemic, or I
Yeah.
think I am, having brain fog and I can't remember anything, and I'm dropping the ball with my kids' schedules and this and that, and we're having perimenopausal hormone fluctuations.
Right.
So it's almost like it would serve us well to add a little more science to the mental health space
Yeah.
and really look under the hood, just like we would think of doing with our heart and our lungs and our endocrine system and all of that.
Yeah. I cannot thank you enough for saying that, because that has been something that's been really eye-opening for me on
Mhm.
my own journey, right? Like really understanding the potential science around, what can potentially be happening on a very real physiologic level when you
Yeah.
have things happening inside your brain. Like there's so much that's correlated, and that whole idea of how health is intertwined. Like it's just something that I super appreciate it, because again, I feel like the mental and emotional component to wellness, especially for us as women, we often just find an excuse for it, right? Or we
Yeah.
find a way to justify what we might be
Mhm.
going through or what we might be experiencing. And I love that you talked about how there's moving pieces to all of these things, not only the stress, not only the things that we just get used to carrying around kind of on autopilot, but
Mhm.
there's also like these intertwining pieces to our physiological being, our brain, our emotions, and so much more. And so I love that you touched on that, Dr. Paige. So incredibly powerful and important. It's something that I really appreciate for sure.
Awesome.
As a wrap up quickly, I would love for you to think about the overwhelmed mom, right, who's listening to this, or the overwhelmed woman who's listening to this, who really wants to like dive deeper on her health, right? She knows that she wants to get connected to a practitioner. She knows that she wants to start to understand root cause wellness, functional medicine, right? Maybe she wants to test her hormones. Maybe she wants just another opinion. She wants more data on her specific body and brain. What would you say to her if she's feeling overwhelmed? Like, how would you empower her to take some steps for her health?
Yeah, I I definitely think, the first step typically is to make space.
Yeah,
I always think of I went to medical school with a gentleman from Cameroon, and he had all these cute African sayings that translated to English. And
I
so
love
when he
that.
would come and sit down beside someone, instead of saying like, oh, pardon me, or excuse me, he would say, make space. And so
I love
we've said
that.
we've said that for 25 years. Like,
It's
we just need to
awesome.
make space. We need to make space. And
Yeah.
so that is the first step to your health. You have to make space. You have to make space to reflect. You have to make space to kind of take an inventory of those pillars of wellness. And that likely means setting some boundaries, having some delegation, opportunities.
Yeah.
It likely involves, I'm sorry to say, admitting that we need help, but it's not a weakness.
Right.
Technically, I think everyone listening to this is like the most high performing,
Yeah. Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
We're just literally doing too much, right?
Right. Right.
And so, the first step is to make space. And then when you're ready, the next step is really to, not only work that self-care plan, but work the professional care plan
Yeah.
and get some foundational testing. It doesn't have to be expensive. Um, and then I think, even though everybody's story is different and your starting point will be, um, you know, your testing may uncover a really, glaring, like, this is where we need to go.
Right.
Even before you get there, we know that if we're not sleeping well, you know, we're not going to be functioning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If we are not, taking small times during the day just to take, a deep breath. We're not expected to be like shot out of bed like a cannon and go, go, go all day, fall asleep, right? We
Right.
have to be kind of managing our energy during the day. And so there are things that that woman can be working on and wrapping her head around even before diving into a relationship with the physician and
Right.
getting the support that you need. But ultimately, I think, that's what they deserve, is
Right.
to, be invested in themselves and really put everything on the table and say, you know what, I'm going to be, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking to reroute and tweak and like adapt to life as I go.
Yeah. I love that. Like, just giving yourself that permission that you deserve, right? That you deserve that level of support and care and love that all of us as women give in some way, shape, or form to so many things and people around us, right? Dr. Paige, thank you so much for your time today. Last question before we kind of share a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and connected to you. This is something I like to ask to pretty much everyone that comes on the podcast because I love to hear everyone's perspectives and kind of what really speaks to them. If you could think of a favorite quote or a favorite mantra or something like mindset focus that reminds you of the importance of taking care of yourself in the chaos of life, what would that be?
I It would have to be, I am meant to be a master rerouter.
I love that.
I am I am not meant to be like on this perfect plan for to some arbitrary destination.
Yeah.
Like, as humans, we are bobbing and weaving, we are adapting,
Yep.
so my goal really is just to be a rerouter.
Yeah. I love that. And it's just good to remember. Like
Yeah.
it's totally about adapting and kind of, giving yourself permission to evolve with your health, with life, and so much more. Dr. Page, quickly tell people how they can find you, how they can connect with you on a website, social, etc.
Yep. So on Instagram, I'm Dr. Paige Do. So it's dr.paige.do. So hit me up there and feel free to ask me a question. I love connecting with people on IG. I'm not the best at social, let's be honest, but I love it, right? And then you can go to drpaige.com, so drpaige.com, and there's information on there, more information about me, connection to my local practice, and connection to my virtual offerings too.
Awesome. Dr. Page, thank you so much. And everyone that's listening today, make sure you guys check out the show notes. I will have all of the information about how to get connected to Dr. Page on social, her website, as well as more details about how to get connected to our sync community, the virtual consults that Page offers through that, piece of the puzzle, and so much more. Dr. Page, thanks again for your time today. I'm super appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care.
Take care.